This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome to this special edition, the Carolina Collection edition of NC Spin. Governor Jim Martin is the subject of a new book pointing out his role as a catalyst in North Carolina politics, and we're delighted to have him as our guest for this program. Welcome, Governor.
Tom, thank you for inviting me. Pleasure.
I read John Hood's excellent book, Catalyst, detailing your many contributions to our state, and we could spend a lot of time unpacking it. Unfortunately, the show's not that long, but there's several themes that I noticed that have run concurrently through your life. You were the son of a Presbyterian minister. Your faith has been very important to you. You also developed an early not ugly, but early liking for music. Oh, yeah. In fact, your mom once said that she was surprised you didn't become a symphony conductor. I'd like to know, you and your brother used to do duets.
Bubba, yeah.
Bubba.
Dr. Bubba now.
Dr. Bubba. Yeah. And you started playing the tuba. Why the tuba?
Well, because you could rent it. You didn't have to buy it. And other instruments you'd have to buy them, and that was a little beyond our means. We usually depend on people to pay pop with a few ears of corn and chicken or something.
Right, those were the days.
Yeah.
Now you also took a very early.
I was a tuba player on the Charlotte Symphony.
I knew that.
Semi-pro.
Semi-pro.
Yeah. I was first chair because I only had one, but yeah, I was in 5 years.
You also took an early liking to science. Yeah. And decided fairly early on that you wanted to major in chemistry.
Our principal was our football coach, and he also taught physics one year and chemistry the next. And I've, had chemistry sets growing up as little boys. Usually they were limited as what you could do, but you could get some nice colors. So, but I was interested in that, of how you could figure out the way something is on a molecular level without being to see it, doing it with wet chemical reactions. So I was fascinated with it. Decided I did not want to be a doctor like Brother Bubba. Went into that, but ended up teaching at Davidson for 12 years.
Now, was it chemistry that attracted you to young Dorothy McCauley at a Presbyterian summer retreat?
I guess it's either DNA or chemistry or something had to do with that, but I'd known her, as young kids going to that summer camp up at Lake Greenwood. It's called now Buzzard Roost Lake it was then. But she was a nice young lady, and I think she had a crush on Bubba, but by the time she and I were of age, we fell in love and got married and raised a family right there in Davidson. After
getting your doctorate at Princeton, you decided to come back. You had options. Yeah. You had several options where to teach. Mm-hmm. Decided to come back to Davidson. Why was that?
Well, the dean of the faculty said, if you'll come back here and teach, within 10 years, you'll be Mr. C. And I said, what does that mean? That's chemistry. That's how you spell chemistry. Yeah. So he was trying to flatter me, and I didn't get it. But, I knew Davidson, loved it. All of our 4 boys, my 3 brothers and I all went there. Dad went there. And we just loved the place and the town. We knew it would be a good place to raise our family. So, yeah, it was good. And
I knew for 12 years.
And I knew in the chemistry, you didn't have to worry about the students being focused on what they were doing, because they're mostly trying to be pre-med.
Yeah.
So they were intense on their studies.
Now, another theme was that your family was very interested in civic affairs and things that went on in the community. But both your parents were Democrats, and you decided to register as a Republican. What happened there?
Well, I probably would have registered as a Democrat, but during graduate school, I guess for the first time, I started thinking about political philosophy. But that was not the thing that made the difference, because back in those days, most Southern Democrats were conservative.
Right.
Most Southern conservatives were Democrats. And if I had thought I was going to run for office, I probably would have decided the place to be was in the Democratic Party. But I had no notion that I enjoyed teaching and was looking forward to a career teaching. I just thought we ought to have in the Southeast a more competitive 2-party rivalry, which I thought would be good for the South. I thought that was one of the things that held back our part of the country, was having domination by just one party. Now, it had factions that could fight, but it's not the same as having the accountability of 2 parties holding each other in tow. And so I didn't think I'd ever have much to do about it, but you read the book and see how that turned out. But at least I could do it one vote at a time, and I could register, and that'd be it.
Republicans, as you say, were very much in the minority. In fact, in those, not too far from that time, there were about 3 registered Democrats for every 1 Republican registered in North Carolina.
Or worse.
They were looking for good candidates to run, and originally started talking to you about running for the legislature, but you decided that you wanted to.
I couldn't come up here. You know, I had laboratories a couple afternoons a week, and my class schedule wasn't any way I could do that, and so I was going about. I had run for town council in Davidson and got beat because I didn't campaign. I fell for this line that we don't campaign here in Little Davidson. You know, we just let people vote for who they think is best qualified. And I thought I had enough friends to win, but I was wrong. I campaigned every time after that.
As John says in the book, that never happened to you again.
Right.
You went 22-0 after that one, if I remember.
It was a pretty good run after that. But that includes primaries, you know, some of which were competitive and some weren't. But in that instance, you know, I was working precinct work and was happy to do that. And I told them I wouldn't be able to go to Raleigh. So they said, well, why don't you run for county commissioner? We were putting together a slate. And all five at large, and they were all Democrats.
What attracted you to the county commissioner in Mecklenburg County?
They talked me into it. And I had a philosophy that local government should be more responsible for and accountable for its responsibilities. Should be doing things that needed to be done at the local level, not just railing at the federal government and telling them they should not be meddling with local affairs. That's easy to make that argument. But what are you doing about it? And I thought local government ought to be meeting its responsibilities. Well, they threw that back at me. And so I said, yes, I would do it. And then I got home and explained it to Dottie, and she said, wait a minute, big boy. we need to talk this over.
Wasn't this supposed to be a partnership here?
Yeah, I never made that mistake again.
So at age 31, you get elected to the Mecklenburg County Commissioner. And during your tenure there, you became chairman of the County Commission. Not only that, but chairman of the County Commissioners Association in North Carolina. What were some of the big issues you faced in Mecklenburg County?
Well, the biggest was public schools. The county there had the responsibility for the consolidated city-county school system, Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system, and it was huge. And it was the biggest part of our budget. And the Republicans, bless their heart, went with me on making the campaign issue that the Democrats had held the schools back and put them last on the budget. In other words, they posted what the tax rate was going to be. They were conservative Democrats. And they posted the tax rate, and then they'd bring in the sheriff, and they'd bring in the health department, and
whatever was left,
everything, and the schools would get a lower millage than the previous time. And we said we'll put them first, and we did, and we brought them in first. We had a meeting out at Davidson to get the school board and the new county commission acquainted with each other. There was one holdover Democrat, Sammy Atkinson, who had been chairman, and he was there, and we gave, everybody had assignments. I think he worked with the legislature for us at that time. So I didn't have much dealings with the legislature until I got to Raleigh. But I'm getting off your subject here.
That's all right. Yeah. And just after these messages, we're going to talk about your run for Congress. We thank you for watching NC Spin on the air and on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. Find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and our weekly column. So get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com.
But you have to buy a book.
That's right. More from Governor Martin in a moment.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
We now return to NC Spin.
We continue our conversation with former Governor Jim Martin, the subject of John Hood's new book, Catalyst. Governor, at age, in your late 30s, I guess, Charlie Jonas announced he was going to retire from Congress. And a lot of people encouraged you to run for that seat. Why did you want to get involved in the federal level?
Well, you know, I had to admire Charlie Jonas. He'd been able to hold on to that seat for 20 years as a Republican, partly because they'd try to redistrict him.
He and Jim Broyhill were our two Republicans.
Well, he taught people how to vote for Broyhill, and then how to vote for Earl Ruth and Wilmer Mizell. But I had great admiration for him. But he had come and talked to me at the post office there in Davidson, where he had a little office, and told me what his plans were. And he asked me to consider. He didn't say, "I'll back you." He said, "Consider it. I think you ought to think about this." And so I did. This time I talked with Dottie first, and then went to Greer Martin and the president, and they worked out an arrangement. They'd bring in somebody to substitute for me, and if I won, he'd have the job. So
during your 12 years in Washington, you faced some pretty big issues that took place, including the just after you got there, the impeachment of Richard Nixon, growing burdensome tax code. Most of the congressmen, particularly the newly elected ones, wanted to be on the Appropriations Committee. You opted to go on Ways and Means. Tell us why that happened.
Well, that was my second term. First term I was on Interior and Insular Affairs, which had nothing to do with Charlotte, you know.
Right.
And the other was Science and Astronautics, and it was really all about the space program. You know, the Houston and Florida people dominated that. But the second year, Jim Broyhill talked with me about it. He was on the committee on committees that would meet and make the horse trading to get it done. And he said, I think I can get you on Ways and Means. I said, you know, I ought to be on Appropriations. That's where Charlie Jonas was. And he said, yeah, but this year they're going to do it in alphabetical reverse order. And so Ways and Means is going to come up early, and Appropriations is going to come just before Agriculture. So there's going to be a big crowd of people trying to get on Appropriations. I think I can get you on. So I said, I don't know much about the tax code.
But you learned.
I had to quick. You know, everybody on there except me was either a tax lawyer or a tax accountant. And so they knew the ins and outs. And I was sort of a free thinker, wasn't burdened by all that knowledge.
I'm really curious, and it's not in the book.
And just think, I could have been chairman of that committee if I'd stayed in there.
If you'd have stayed there. Yeah. You served with 4 presidents, Nixon, Ford, Carter, and Reagan.
Yeah.
Any stories or any favorites you want to talk about there?
Well, you know, you start with Nixon. He was very controversial, but he was a very smart man, and he understood foreign policy, I'd say, as well as Kissinger did, I mean, and better than most people would. And I think it was very lamentable that he would get himself caught up in that cover-up in a way that eventually came out. And when that smoking gun hit, Trent Lott, who was a good friend of mine, now senator, or recently was a senator from Mississippi, Trent and I sort of said, you know, last one down, close the lid.
But it seemed like you and Reagan were really close. You were very instrumental in helping him pass the Kemp-Roth bill, the
well, even before
bill.
He got there, I you know, everybody I think in the party admired him, but I supported Gerald Ford's campaign to be elected as he was the incumbent succeeding Nixon. And he lost to Jimmy Carter. But when Reagan came in again, I'd been working with Jack Kemp, who was on Appropriations, but had all these ideas about tax policy.
Right.
And he needed some allies on the Ways and Means Committee. So Carol Campbell and I, and you know, a group of us, Bill Gradison, Bill Steiger from Wisconsin, we'd meet with him and try to figure ways to get some of his ideas into the bills. And by debating them over and over, we gradually began to win over some of the Democrats who were in the majority. So that while Reagan, when he was elected, the Kemp bill became the Reagan bill, but it still had to come out of Ways and Means. So that little group.
Would you say they were your great accomplishments, helping to get the tax cuts
in Congress? Yeah, that. Of course, I had a solo effort to save saccharin and artificial sweeteners.
Fascinating story in the book. And
you got to read the book.
We don't have time to go into that one, but it is a fascinating story because you
I was
just
all over the
debunked
country
whole
with
thing.
Ralph Nader's people debating about it and how you shouldn't be banning something at the drop of a rat.
Yeah.
You know? and how many cans of diet soda you'd have to drink. It'd drown you, Tom. You couldn't do 800 cans.
It's a great story in the book. All right, so by 1983, you'd been in Congress for 6 terms, and you said you wanted to move, that it was very tiresome to your family. Responsibility. You had a young family at the time.
Yeah, and
you were ready to move back to North
time.
Carolina.
Yeah.
Jim Hunt was leaving office. He had served the 2 terms he was enabled to serve. North Carolina had only elected 1 Democrat in the 20th century. What made you decide? I mean, Republican. Yeah. What made you decide to run for governor?
Lust for power.
Oh, come on! I know better than that.
Well, you know, until about the time they were starting the primary battle for the Democrats, I really didn't have much interest in it, and I heard from one reporter who called me and said, "I understand you're thinking about running for governor." I said, "Well, not until you called, but I'll think about it." And I remember writing to one fellow who had asked me to run in a letter, tell him I just didn't think I'd be good at it. I hadn't had any executive responsibility, but he said, you hire people. You appoint people to help you do that. But I got to thinking about it and talked with Dottie a little bit, and her eyes lit up. She thought, living in Virginia, I mean, she was active in the church and the school committee and all those kind of things, but she didn't really love being up there. And so we said, well, this is an opportunity. We'll either win or we'll lose, and either way, we'll be back in North Carolina.
So you win either way?
Yeah, win either way.
All right, Ronald Reagan was on his way to the 2nd term.
Yep.
Very popular.
Big help for me, yeah.
Jesse Helms was engaged in a fight with Jim Hunt in 1984. Yep. The Democrats had a 10-man dogfight going on for the primary election that year. What was your 1984 campaign platform?
Well, it was about a couple of things, but not about 100 things. That was one of the things I tried to point out. It makes no sense trying to have 100 issues to campaign on because nobody knows what you stand for. You get no repetition. You've got to have a focus on a few things. And one of them, of course, is that education. Public education is a big responsibility of the state here in North Carolina. And the other was economic development, a good Republican conservative issue, and the tax code. We had taxes back in those days on your savings account. It's called an intangibles tax. And you're taxed on it when you earn it, then you put it in the savings account or buy stocks and bonds. There were different tax rates for those different things, but it was all just the value of them, not the dividends and interest. It was on the value of the stock. And then there was this mischievous tax on manufacturing inventories. North Carolina was a manufacturing state. What are we doing taxing manufacturing inventories and making it difficult for North Carolina companies to compete on a world
scale, capital to expand,
and employ people? And so I made that a big issue and drove that hard, and couldn't get it all at first.
Governor, in order to win that, we talked before about how many Democrats and how many Republicans there were in North Carolina. Yeah. In order to win the governor's office, you had to enlist Democrats to vote for you. What was your strategy for doing that?
It is worse than that. I ended up with more Democrats voting for me than there were Republican voters.
Wow.
So even if you assume I got 100% of them, which would not be a safe assumption, of the Republicans had more votes from Democrats because I had come up as a county commissioner and as a congressman campaigning on the basis of what my ideas were, not what my party was. I had to appeal to Democrats to consider what I was doing. So I launched it that way, and we won it. And we had Democrats for Martin organization all over the state. We had a neighbors program that would get out the vote. It was sort of original, and innovative in its day. But we had somebody on every block in every Republican precinct. We didn't want to stir up the D's, but we had to get our people there to vote, so we could do it.
All right, after these messages, we're going to talk about 8 years in office as governor. Stay with us.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with the medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, "Come on, we're leaving."
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
Welcome back to this special Carolina Collection interview with Governor Jim Martin, subject of John Hood's new book, Catalyst. Governor, when you took office in 1985, I guess it was.
Yeah, January
85. You had a solidly entrenched Democratic Party, legislature, that seemed poised to fight you on every front, and yet somehow you managed to work with them to pass some fairly significant legislation during your 8 years in office. Of what were you most proud as governor?
You know, I didn't expect the resistance that I got. I mean, I'd worked with Democrats on the county commission, both the majority and minority.
And
with
on
Democrats in Washington, I was always in the minority there. And I expected that once the election was over, there would be a working together. We'd look for things that I knew the General Assembly would have its prerogatives and its interest in legislation, but I figured they would at least listen and know. As soon as they met, they started taking away appointive power from the governor, which should have been covered by the constitutional separation of powers.
Fight going on right now about it.
Yeah, well, it started maybe back in those days, and it didn't stop when Governor Hunt got back in office, or Governor Easley or Governor Perdue. The General Assembly had moved to a new phase of trying to be both the executive and the legislative branch. And so I had a fight on my hands. When I was elected, I didn't think we'd need a veto, even though I was the only governor in America. Even American Samoa, the governor had a veto, but not in North Carolina. And so I decided, because of that reaction and the way they were treating the office of governor, that I had to be able to fight back. The biggest thing, though, was being able, through the news media, and particularly with television, to go out and make the point in communities around the state, so that there will be a little pressure building for people to say to their legislator, I think you need to be fair with it.
You became a master of going into every media market in this state, holding press conferences to advocate your issues.
Well, I had to. And one of the examples is the Highway Trust Fund. Right. Before the 1988 election, with Bob Jordan, the lieutenant governor, getting ready to run for him, a wonderful man. He and Sarah are good friends of ours and still are. But I had proposed a program to build 4-lane highways all across the state, not in every county, but within 10 miles of every county, so they could appeal for industry to come and you could get their stuff to the market. And they immediately voted it down just to show who was in control. Well, that set an issue for me. I could go on the campaign trail in '88 talking about the need for a highway system that was suitable for North Carolina.
But you had Highway Trust Fund, you had a prison issue that came up. The feds sued you and for hot bunking prisoners, and we had to change.
And Chief Justice Burley Mitchell helped me to get that sold on a bipartisan basis.
And then you had
statewide.
budget problems in the latter part of your administration.
At the beginning, the budget was in my favor. We had revenues and we could propose tax cuts, and of course the answer would be no, we got to spend more. And of course that's a good Democrat-Republican battlefield right there. And I couldn't win it all at first, but I could begin to chip away, and eventually we got rid of the intangibles and inventory tax.
In the book, John Hood talks about a meeting right after you took office at Blackberry Farm in Tennessee with a number of Republican leaders. Tell us about this and how it helped North Carolina elect more Republicans.
Well, I admired Lamar Alexander, who was then governor of Tennessee, and we talked about this, that people would vote for President Reagan at the top of the ticket, obviously vote for us, he and myself as governor, for U.S. Senate, maybe for Congress, but after that, the average person wouldn't know who the candidates were, wouldn't know what they stood for because there wasn't enough information about them. And that gave a big advantage to the registration that people would then go back and vote their party, the party of their ancestors, for legislature, for sheriff, for county commission, for school board, for that matter, even though they were nonpartisan, and for judge. There's no Republican got elected to not only the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, but to the Superior Court because it was statewide partisan election. And we got together, this group included Carol Campbell, who later became governor of South Carolina, a real good friend of ours, Newt Gingrich, who was just full of ideas about what to do, Connie Mack from Florida, and good old John Sununu from New Hampshire coming in. We talked the same with Governor Thornburg from Pennsylvania because of his role in the Republican Governors Association. But we would meet and we'd chew it over, and then we'd go pitch horseshoes. Blackberry Pharmacy was owned by Lamar Alexander's family, his wife's family. Okay. And so we invited people there, the wives were there, and we would socialize a little bit. And we started working away, not only how to get wedges to drive between the Democratic Party and its registered voters, but also magnets to bring them over to the Republican Party. Right. We had Operation Switch, and the first out of the box was the Democrat who was the chairman of the county commissioners in Wake County. He said, I'll take the lead on it.
And it worked.
And it worked. We got them, and now it's a competitive system. And here you go back to 1960 as a little professor registering just as a protest to say, I'm going to be in the minority, I don't care what you say, to being able to work with these people and
fascinating
to get it done. And you look at it now, maybe we went too far, some would say, but we're at a point now, Democrats still outnumber Republicans, but then there's a lot of people who are non-party, and it's parity. Yeah.
We'll have more with Governor Martin after these messages.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hey everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
Clean transportation options can help you fuel what matters.
We're fueling what matters to us by converting our fleet of collection trucks over to compressed natural gas. It's a good, smart business decision, and having the air cleaner is something that benefits all the families that work with us.
We use biodiesel in our heavy equipment. We've got propane in a lot of our police cars, and we've really embraced the electric car. Join the city of Raleigh and fuel what matters.
To learn how you can fuel what matters, visit fuelwhatmatters.org.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
Governor, I've often said you never received the recognition and appreciation you deserve for your contributions to our state. I think John Hood's book, Catalyst, explains why we owe you a great debt, and I thank you for being with us this week.
Tom, thank you. I have no regrets about it. I had a great time.
Well, good.
Wonderful experience for me.
We thank you for all you've done. Next week, NC Spin returns to our regular program of balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.